This is one of the main issues that I hear from beginners. They go, oh, I can't remember what I learned. It just feels like my brain turns off. You've started jiu-jitsu, you've started training, you've learned how difficult it can be to put the pieces of the puzzle together. You feel like you learned something one day and then you go to use it and it's just completely vanished from your brain. In this video, what we're going to cover is some tips and tricks that I've found, mostly studying people who learn language models very quickly. They can assimilate languages in less than 6 months. And so if they can do that, you can definitely learn jiu-jitsu faster. So speaking of these freaks that learn languages in less than 6 months, Jake alluded to that. It's obviously much more difficult than trying to learn a move in jiu-jitsu and then apply it. And so even just from a conceptual idea, thinking about how much harder that is to do and yet they are still successful in their endeavors should give you a lot of motivation and a lot of courage to be able to throw yourself down a learning path, especially with a sport that is complex but also very simple at the same time. It's difficult, but it is also very simple at the same time. It's a hard learning curve, but it's nowhere near as difficult as learning a language from scratch in something that does not sound like anything you've ever heard before. Trying to turn English into Arabic, I can imagine, is extremely difficult. I've never done it. It's too hard. So anyway, I found a few concurrent things with jiu-jitsu from learning language models, and hopefully this gives you guys some weaponry to be able to learn a little bit faster. So what is intelligence and how do we sort of increase it in regards to learning? There's a very basic understanding of this that was popularized by Alex Hormozi recently. He's a business guru, he's a really smart guy. And he says that intelligence is your capacity to react correctly to X circumstances in as little time or attempt as possible. And so the example that he uses is that if he has a red card and a green card. Red card means he slaps you in the face. Green card means nothing happens. And so every time he presents the red card, you don't know what's going to happen. He's just got red card, green card. Green card, nothing happens. You just sit there. Red card, slap. That's your litmus test for what now you know is going to happen, right? And so if he goes green card and you don't do anything, cool, no worries, you learnt that one. Red card and you don't duck when he tries to slap you, you're an idiot. You're getting slapped in the face twice now. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And then so it's your ability to learn that red card means slap and then duck out of the way or duck your head this way. And jiu-jitsu is the exact same thing. If you have a training partner that sees a position, let's say like you go on top of them into butterfly half, and every time they put you in butterfly half, they take an arm drag. And so when you go into butterfly half the next time and you don't defend the arm drag, you're an idiot. So what you'll start to realize is there are a chain of events and there's going to be a red card in everybody's game that you roll with, and it's always going to be present. It's going to be a natural order of things. And that's what you really should be learning if you want to expedite your learning process. It doesn't make sense to learn an armbar from mount and then a close guard sweep and then a knee cut pass in the middle somehow, because there's not a sequential order of things that's going on there. Rather, and you guys would have seen this in the lessons that we teach on the YouTube channel, let's say you're in reverse De La Riva and your opponent starts to blade their stance away. Well, you can enter inside position, or you can knock them onto their butt using knee levers, or if they come towards you, you can start to invert. So now you're starting to see, all right, well, the red card that he's presenting me is if he turns his body away, I can send him that way. If he brings his body forwards, I can bring him forwards. So now you're starting to learn action, reaction, and the consequences of those things. Now you're becoming more intelligent in terms of how you're learning jiu-jitsu, because you're not just reacting to not reacting to the red card and then getting slapped. You're going, that's a red card, I know what's coming next, so then I do this. And I remember when I first did a private lesson with my first private coach, Josh Alsop, purple belt at the time, very, very good. And he said to me, he goes, what I want you to do after this session, I want you to write down all the moves that you know, and then I want you to write down all the positions that you know, and see how much or how little you actually know about the sport. And I went and I did it, and I wrote down, for instance, back in the day, it was like north-south, I know north-south choke. That was it. And then in half guard, Das. Side control, also Das. Mount, also Das. And just like, I just didn't know a lot. And so then what I did was retroactively get an instructional, and I would fill in the gaps of the knowledge where I had the biggest amount to learn, where I literally couldn't label even one thing. I knew Near cut passing, I knew smash passing because of him, of what he was teaching me, but I had no idea how to utilize reverse De La Riva or De La Riva or X guard, or I hadn't even got into those positions within like 6 months of training. So for me, that was a really cool window to see where my biggest return on investment was going to be. And then what I tried to do was build in action, reaction in those positions rather than just going, I'm going to try X guard and I'm not going to learn why X guard works. So that I'm going to end up seeing the red card and getting slapped, essentially. And so if you can figure out the action reaction, then you're going to have a much faster time learning the whole process. And if we can change our behavior regarding these actions and reactions, then we're going to modify our intelligence and therefore become smarter grapplers just by our ability to be shown X and respond with Y. It's not just about X. It's not just about Y. You could want to do a front headlock attack all you want, but if you can't force them into turtle, then force them into turtle from a standing position, you're never going to be able to use it. And so what you actually should be learning to do is figuring out the X input, which is snapping them down, getting them into front headlock so that you could actually attack them. To go back into the conceptual stuff again, is that what this actually shows you is that intelligence isn't this thing that you're born with and it's just, that's it. That's your highest level ever. It's actually moldable and it's actually adaptable so that you can get more intelligent within a specific field. Yes, you might not be able to do quantum physics and you might not be a physicist, but your application of your intelligence can be much higher. And so what you're actually learning in this system now, instead of being closed-minded and thinking, well, I'm only so good at this, so I'm just going to do what I'm good at, you're actually now taking, from Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, you're taking an open-minded mindset to think, well, I can get better and I can apply myself more and I can think about the sport in a different way and I can change my perspective on how it's learned. That means I can get better at a much faster rate and actually feel good about the entire process rather than just red card, slap, red card, slap. And you'd be surprised. There's people who do this for 5 to 8 years at a time, all the way to brown belt. And this one guy in their training room comes in and knee cuts them and darces them every session. They're an idiot. Whether you like it or not, you're an idiot. If you continually experience the results of a behavior and you don't change the behavior and the results aren't what you like, you're a goose. Ask somebody who does know, but at least be aware of this behavior leads to this result. And if this behavior is shit, this result's going to be shit. If you don't like this result, change this shitty behavior. Very simple. So what we talked about in number 1 is a very practical application of thinking about what actually constitutes the effectiveness of this move and why would I be using it. Not just, I know this move, I'm going to try and do that no matter what. That's going to get you nowhere very quickly. And so when you're studying, number 2 is when you're studying the sport, it's actually taking that same active process, like we we're talking about writing out the list and seeing what you're good at and seeing what you have no idea. But not just watching the video just to watch it. Like, people will still study the sport and just watch it for entertainment, or they watch it because they think they should be doing it, or they watch a jiu-jitsu match and they just go, oh yeah, this is fun to watch, or like, who do you think won? That was it. And so now if you superimpose the red card getting slapped and green card being no slap, you think about it like this. You go, well, what behavior am I intending to change by watching this video? What am I actually trying to get out of this? Because if you're not watching it with a purpose, just like if you're not training with a purpose, you'll be experiencing the exact same shitty results every single time. And so before you watch an instructional, you have to validate that it's something that you're going to want to improve upon. It's something you're having trouble with. It's something you don't know anything about. There have to be these core elements that you're actually trying to actively solve. Just because somebody comes out with a brand new thing doesn't mean you have to watch it. It's probably more likely going to lead you to more confusion than it is more answers. Especially with studying interesting fields, particularly in history or politics, the more you know, the more you question everything, and then you just get super confused. And so ask yourself, before watching any study material, before watching any match, what is the behavior I'm attempting to change as a result of watching this video? Because when you watch a video and you don't change any behavior, you're just pretending to learn. And you're just actually entertaining yourself. It's just mental masturbation, basically. And that's fine. You're allowed to entertain yourself, but you won't be getting better. You won't actually be learning something from this video and then being able to apply it at a later stage. And again, like we we're talking about, you can learn as much as you want intellectually, but if you can't apply it, It doesn't matter. And so number 3 is using that system as a base. How do we effectively tune our mind just by using perspective? So if I asked you to completely learn a move, start to finish, and use it on the best guy in your gym in 1 minute, could you do it? No. No, right? It's unlikely. What about a day? Probably still not likely, right? Yeah, Jake's shaking the camera. What about a month? Maybe, right? Now we're certainly getting closer. What about a decade? Most certainly. So you see through that time horizon of being able to change, I guess, the urgency of how you're trying to learn something. You're actually monitoring your expectations, not to pretend like you should be hitting it on the first day. A lot of people make this mistake and it blunts their learning because it lowers their motivation and it lowers their excitement to be able to try new things. And all they do is go back into this tiny little hole of 5 techniques that they use all day, every day, because it makes them feel good about themselves and it makes them feel like they're capable in the sport. The issue is that a lot of people put this very short window of timeline. You see it in business all the time. People want to be millionaires by the time they're 18. The statistical likelihood of that happening is this big. And my head for reference, it's very small. My head's very big. So what you need to recognize is that if you attenuate your expectations and think, well, I'm not going to be getting this first try, best guy in the room, day one. What could I use that? How am I going to use that understanding to be able to learn faster? Well, maybe I try things on the lower level guys in the room that are at or around my skill level that are lighter than me. And then maybe once I've checked that box, maybe I'll pick people that are a slightly above where I'm at, or maybe they're better than me, but they're lighter. And then you can attenuate that to go up a level where they're better than you and they're a little bit heavier, or they're better than you and they're a lot heavier. And then you go up to another level. So say if you're a blue belt, you go to purple belt and they're lighter than you, but they're just at or around the same level. And then you try and use that move on them. So you're actually like stagger stepping your structure out so that you don't lose a lot of motivation and a lot of that spark that keeps you hungry to keep learning things and keep learning the sport. Because if your perspective is that if you can't pull it off in the first day against the best guy in your room, then the move doesn't work, again, you're never going to be learning anything for a long period of time. You're going to narrow your window of what you think is useful and what you think is acceptable. And then you're just going to be one of these guys that gets shown the red card and gets slapped. And that's not how you learn fast. What we've just explained in number 3 is essentially a hedge against overwhelm and confusion. Because granted, a lot of people get into the sport, they're very excited, they're very motivated to learn how they can finally beat that pesky blue belt who keeps ankle locking them and there's nothing they can do about it. Definitely been there before. What you need to recognize is that you need to shift your perspective on how fast you're going to be learning something. And then that way, in a paradoxical sense, you actually learn a lot faster because you're not beating yourself up for the fact that you're not learning this and not getting it and not making progress. And this is why it's really important that you have a fresh perspective on what it's actually going to take to learn a move and how you're actually going to be implementing it in a very structured fashion. Because if you're just throwing it at the wall, seeing what sticks, you watch an instructional for entertainment, you remember 2 or 3 seconds of the sequence, you go in and try it, and then you write it off completely. So many people do that. So many people are not willing to put the conscious effort in to make themselves get better. And then they end up just going, well, studying's not for me, that doesn't work, closed mindset, this guy's just better because he's got better genetics, this guy's just better because he trains at a better gym and there's nothing I can do about that, and blah, 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 blah. And the big hedge against that are guys like McGregor or Bisping or Leon Edwards and these guys in the UFC, Volkanovski, who were training in their home gym and still became UFC champion. They didn't have to go to other areas. They didn't have to go to other camps. Sure, they brought people in for help and all that sort of stuff. And obviously McGregor towards the later end of his career was going to LA to train, but that was for location and scenery. That wasn't for teammates or anything like that. They kept with the same team. They had the same teammates the whole way through, the same coaches, everything like that, and they still succeeded. So it was this very growth-orientated mindset where they weren't closed down. They were willing to put the work in, do the mental work as well as the physical work, and then get much better, much faster as a result of that. Roger Gracie moving to a brand new facility away from all his teammates, away from all his coaches, basically running the room, running the gym, starting a business, and training with blue belts the entire time. And granted, he was already very, very good by the time he got there. But in saying that, still succeeded, still got better because he already had a system and a foundation of understanding of how he needed to get better, so that it didn't even really matter that he wasn't getting perfect reactions from blue belts. Mikey Musumeci talked about this. He was teaching people in Singapore or Hong Kong or wherever he lives, I'm not sure. He was teaching people very specific reactions that he wanted them to give so that they could try and beat him at something he was working on. And he would give them the tools to beat him so that it would be competitive in this one very, very small area of what he wanted to work on. And that's a fantastic way to go about it because he obviously had a plan, had a guide, had a structure of where he wanted to go, and then he was implementing that even without high-level training partners. So it goes to show you that if you have an open mindset, you can learn a lot faster, even with limited tools at your disposal. So key takeaways, or too long didn't watch. You can't do too long didn't read because you guys aren't reading. Being an intelligent grappler is being able to respond to a move being used in as little occurrences as possible. Not getting triangled 3 times in a round for 30 weeks in a row, because that means you're a goober. And on interesting note, a side note as well, if you read The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, he is Marcelo Garcia's first black belt. He's also a chess prodigy. Searching for Bobby Fischer was actually about his life. If you watch the movie, fascinating individual. He's gone on to be a Tai Chi push hands world champion, a competitive black belt in Marcelo Garcia's room, and now he's doing foiling, which is this weird surfing thing, but he's like becoming world class at that because he just knows how to learn. And he said, you hit Marcelo with one thing once that you've been working on for like 6 months, and you bring your little presentation to class and you hit it on him and you finally get it, and then he downloads it and you never hit it on him again, ever. And he goes, Marcelo was such a phenomenal learner that he had the ability to be shown something once and then use it immediately, or be hit with something once and learn about his body and what the mistake was and then never get hit with it ever again. And their whole training room was just trying to hit him with the same move twice, and they never got him. He would stream his ADCC camp training rounds live where his competitors could watch it in the lead up to his training to see what he was working on, and he didn't hide anything. And he still destroyed everybody. Went 7 for 8 as a 77 kilo athlete. Unbelievable. I believe it was 7 for 8, right?
I don't know.
Or was it 6 for 8?
I'm not sure.
Because I remember Drysdale, I think it was 7, because Hodges 8 for 8. Kynan has now tied, I believe, Marcelo for 7 for 8, and Gordon 6 for 8. I'm pretty sure.
Something like that.
But anyway, second key takeaway, asking what behavior am I going to change when I'm watching study material will actually help you apply the move, because it will mean something to you. It will be grounded in physicality. It will be that frustration that motivates you to get better. And you won't be watching it for edutainment purposes. You won't just be viewing it while you're eating food and then putting it away and not using it. And number 3, key takeaway, was extending the time horizon for learning a move. Instead of putting so much pressure on yourself to think that you should be using it one day, one go, best guy in the room, very unlikely, very unreasonable. So maybe even moving it from a day to a week, even 2, is a great way to alleviate pressure, enhance your focus, reduce your overwhelm, and give you a mental reward when you assimilate the move into your game, likely in less time than what you thought that it was going to happen, but at least not like a 1 day or a 24-hour period. And so if you use these to your advantage, you'll get much better, much faster.